bus rattled along the narrow, winding roads of the Appalachian foothills, its tires crunching over a mixture of gravel and fallen leaves. Olivia Hart pressed her forehead against the cold glass window, staring at the dense forests that swallowed the horizon in a sea of shadows. She had never felt a place so alive and yet so utterly silent. It was as if the town she was heading toward, Blackridge, existed in its own time, untouched by modernity, and perhaps untouched for good reason. The town's welcome sign was faded to near illegibility. "Welcome to Blackridge," it read, though the letters seemed to tremble in the gray mist that hovered over the hills. A chill ran down Olivia's spine, but she forced herself to breathe normally, telling herself it was just the autumn wind, just nerves. Olivia had come to Blackridge to research local legends for her upcoming book, a collection of American ghost stories. But as the bus slowed to a stop in the town square, something about the place seemed wrong. The streets were nearly empty. A few old wooden houses leaned at odd angles, their paint peeling and windows dark. Not a single person met her eyes as they passed, and the faint smell of decay lingered in the air. At the center of town stood a small, dilapidated inn with a flickering lantern above the door. The driver gave her a curt nod before pulling away, leaving her alone. She grabbed her suitcase, trying to shake off the feeling that eyes were watching her from the shadows. Inside the inn, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and old wood. The front desk was empty, but a bell sat there, dusty and unpolished. Olivia rang it, and after a moment, the floorboards creaked and a thin, gray-haired man appeared from the back corridor. "You must be Hart," he said, his voice rasping like dry leaves. "I'm Mace. I run this place." "Yes, that's me," Olivia replied, offering a small smile. "I've booked a room for a week." Mace's eyes flickered over her like a candle's flame, unsteady and wary. "Blackridge isn't like other towns. Things happen here. Some come seeking stories and some never leave. Mind that." Olivia laughed nervously, assuming it was a local joke. But Mace didn't smile. He handed her a tarnished key. "Room 3, up the stairs, end of the hall. Don't wander after dark. Some paths lead where you don't want to go." She nodded, trying to appear brave, though her stomach tightened. The staircase groaned under her weight as she carried her suitcase up. The shadows from the single swinging light, stretching and twisting unnaturally across the walls. Room 3 was small but serviceable, with a single window that faced the forest. The mist outside seemed to press against the glass, making the woods look alive, as though the trees were leaning closer to watch. By nightfall, the town was swallowed by an almost unnatural darkness. Olivia stood by her window, notebook in hand, scribbling observations and trying to capture the uneasy feeling that hung over Blackridge. Then she heard it, a faint whisper, so soft it could have been the wind. "Olivia?" She froze. Her name carried on a voice that seemed to come from the woods themselves. She turned, heart pounding, but the room was empty. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had read too many old diaries, listened to too many local tales. Maybe it was just the forest, the wind, her imagination. Yet deep down she knew it wasn't. From the shadows of the room, something moved. Just for a second, a figure flickered, as though caught between worlds. She blinked and it was gone. But the whisper returned closer now, almost at her ear. "Don't look beyond the veil." Olivia's breath hitched. The notebook slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. She was alone, she thought, but the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes pressing from every corner of the room, refused to leave. Somewhere in the forest, a low, hollow hum began, vibrating through the walls and floor. And somewhere deep inside, Olivia felt that her arrival in Blackridge had awakened something older, something that had waited for her, something that had been waiting behind the hollowed veil. The morning air in Blackridge was crisp, yet it carried a heaviness that Olivia couldn't place. The mist lingered low to the ground, clinging to the crooked houses like a shroud. She wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck and stepped outside, determined to explore the town before the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The streets were quiet, too quiet. Occasionally, she would see a figure in a doorway or a shadow slipping behind a curtain, but no one stopped to speak. When she tried to ask for directions to the old library, a young man with hollow eyes and an expressionless face shook his head, whispering only, "You don't want to know." Olivia frowned. "Excuse me?" He was already gone, swallowed by the fog, leaving her alone with the echo of his warning. She turned toward the center of town, hoping to find someone more welcoming, The square was ringed with abandoned shops, their windows boarded or cracked. Only the general store seemed alive, though even there the air felt heavy. A bell jingled as she pushed open the door. Inside, a middle-aged woman with pale skin and dark hair stared at her with unreadable eyes. "You're new," she said flatly, as if stating the obvious. "Yes," Olivia replied. "I'm here to learn about Blackridge's history." The woman's lips twisted just barely, into what might have been a smile or a warning. "History," she echoed. "It has a way of swallowing people whole." "Best leave it be." Olivia felt a shiver, but she smiled politely. "I'm a writer, The woman's gaze hardened. "Writers are the worst. They ask too many questions. The Hollow sees them. It remembers them." Olivia froze. "The Hollow?" The woman nodded slightly, then abruptly returned to tending her shelves. Olivia felt the word hang in the air, heavy and ominous, like a name that should never be spoken aloud. Leaving the store, she tried to shake off the tension. Yet, every step she took felt watched. Every shadow seemed to move with intention. She noticed symbols etched into the wood of door frames. Small scratches that made no sense, half circles. Triangles, lines that didn't resemble letters. They were everywhere. By mid-afternoon, Olivia had walked almost the entire town and had seen nothing but strange stares, silent warnings and unspoken fear. Every resident she tried to speak with either avoided her gaze or whispered her name into the wind before disappearing. It was as if the town itself was alive, conscious, and intent on keeping its secrets buried. She returned to the inn, feeling exhausted but restless. She couldn't shake the feeling that Blackridge was hiding something, a truth wrapped in fear, a darkness older than the mountains themselves. Her questions began to consume her, especially the one word that kept recurring: Hollow. The next night, she found herself unable to sleep. The whispering returned, stronger, insistent. It was more than a voice now, it was a chorus of voices, echoing from the trees, from the walls, from the very air around her. Find it, or be found. Olivia grabbed her flashlight and notebook, stepping outside despite the chill. The mist had thickened, and the town seemed unrecognizable in the dim light. Shapes moved within it, indistinct but undeniably present. As she moved cautiously down the empty street, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. Footprints in the mud that led toward the forest. Though no one had been there, curiosity overrode her fear. She followed them. The trail led her to the edge of the forest, where the trees grew so thick they blocked out the moonlight. Here she saw signs of a ritual. Candles, long burned down to stubs, surrounded by symbols etched into the earth. Animal bones lay scattered, picked clean. Her stomach churned, and she felt bile rise in her throat. A rustling sound made her spin around, flashlight trembling in her hand. Shadows shifted between the trees, forming shapes that were almost human, almost not. A voice, many voices, again spoke in unison. "Olivia Hart, you were warned." The forest seemed to breathe, the mist swirling around her legs as if alive. And then she saw it, the Hollow itself. Not a person, not a creature, but a void. A darkness that pulsed and breathed, absorbing the faint light from her flashlight, growing larger, stretching toward her. Her legs froze. Her mind screamed to run, but her body didn't obey. The voices whispered, laughing, crying, and moaning all at once. "Look beyond the veil." Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the darkness receded, leaving her alone at the forest's edge. The symbols remained, burned into the ground, a reminder that what she had seen was no hallucination. Shivering, she stumbled back to the inn. Knowing one thing with terrifying clarity, Blackridge was not just a town. It was a trap, a living nightmare, and the Hollow had been waiting for her all along. And in the shadows of the night, the town whispered her name again. The following night, Olivia could hardly sleep. Every shadow in her room seemed alive, every creak of the old inn's floorboards echoing like a whisper in the darkness. The wind howled through the broken window panes. But there was more to it, a sound she couldn't place. A low hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls, through the floor, into her very bones. Finally unable to endure the oppressive quiet, she grabbed her flashlight and notebook and stepped into the hall. The inn was unnervingly silent, yet every step she took was met with the faintest echo of voices, whispering her name in tones that were almost human, almost not. "Olivia, come, find us." Her heart pounded as she reached the stairs, their wood groaning under her weight. She paused, straining to listen. The voices were coming from outside, or perhaps from somewhere in the forest beyond the inn. They weren't calling to her politely. They were beckoning, pulling her toward the unknown. Against her better judgment, she followed. Outside, the mist hung thick and choking. Curling around the town like a living thing, she flicked on her flashlight and saw the familiar footprints, leading toward the forest fresh, unmistakable and impossible to trace. The trees loomed over her, gnarled branches scratching against one another like the hands of desperate spirits. Shadows danced, twisting into shapes that were vaguely human. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she realized they were moving closer, circling her in silence. A voice broke the quiet, loud and sharp, cutting through the hum like a knife. "You shouldn't have come here." Olivia swung her flashlight wildly. Nothing, just trees, just fog, and then movement. A figure, indistinct and trembling, emerged from the mist. Its face was pale, stretched in agony, eyes hollow yet burning with an unnatural light. "You see us," it whispered. Finally. Her hands shook. "Who? What are you?" "We are the Lost," the figure replied. "The Hollow keeps us here. It feeds on our fear, our memory, our soul, and now it wants you." Before she could respond, more figures emerged, surrounding her in the dim light. Their voices intertwined into a chorus, speaking words she couldn't understand, though they resonated deep within her mind. Olivia tried to back away, but her legs wouldn't move, as if the mist itself held her in place. The Hollow pulsed ahead, a dark, writhing void that absorbed all light, all warmth. Its edges shimmered, revealing glimpses of horrors she couldn't comprehend. People twisted into unrecognizable forms, faces screaming in silence, shadows moving with a life of their own. "Step closer. See what you've ignored," it whispered. Terrified, Olivia forced herself to take one step forward. The ground beneath her seemed to breathe, pulse, contract. She could hear the whispers of everyone lost in Blackridge over the years, warning, screaming, begging. Then she saw them. The ritual symbols from the previous night burned into the earth, glowing faintly. Candles flickered to life, though the wind was still and the air thick with mist. The Hollow's voice reached her mind directly. "Your fear, your curiosity, it belongs to me now." Olivia screamed and turned to run, but the forest had changed. The path she had followed was gone, replaced by a labyrinth of gnarled trees and mist that shifted with each step. Whispers followed her, always just behind, sometimes ahead, always surrounding. She stumbled, falling to her knees, and the Hollow loomed over her, its darkness stretching taller, wider, consuming the light of her flashlight. Faces appeared in the void, faces she recognized from the town. The pale woman in the general store, the hollow-eyed young man, Mace from the inn, all staring at her with empty eyes, trapped within the darkness. "Help us!" the voices cried, fading into a chorus of silence. Then a whisper, cold and sharp, like ice on her neck. "See beyond the veil or be lost forever." The mist shifted violently, and Olivia's vision blurred. The ground beneath her seemed to dissolve into nothingness. Panic surged through her veins, but amidst the terror, a part of her mind, the part she relied on as a writer, recorded everything. Every detail, every whisper, every shadow. Her body screamed to move, and finally, she scrambled to her feet, trying to retrace her steps. But every turn brought her deeper into the forest. The Hollow was no longer just a void. It was everywhere. In the trees, the fog, the air, even inside her mind. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang. It wasn't from the inn. It was a hollow metallic sound, echoing endlessly, as though marking each heartbeat, each stolen breath. Olivia realized then that the town itself was alive, feeding the Hollow with memory and fear, and that she was now part of its story. With a desperate lunge, she pushed through the mist and broke into a clearing. The fog cleared just enough to show the inn in the distance, but the path back was not the one she remembered. Something had changed while she was gone, and then she heard it, a voice whispering directly into her ear, unmistakably close. "You will see the Hollow fully, and when you do, nothing will ever be the same." Olivia froze. The forest had swallowed the light of the stars. The wind had stopped. Even the whispers had fallen silent, leaving a deafening void that pressed against her chest. She knew with a sinking certainty that whatever waited beyond the hollowed veil was coming for her. By daylight, the town seemed almost normal. The mist had lifted, replaced by a pale, gray sunlight filtering weakly through the autumn trees. But for Olivia, the horrors of the night lingered, like shadows pressed into her skin. She felt as though the Hollow had left an imprint on her very soul. Determined to find answers, she returned to the inn, hoping Mace or the townspeople could shed some light. But when she mentioned the forest, the footprints, or the hollow itself, Mace's expression darkened. "You shouldn't speak of it," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "Once you see the hollow, you cannot unsee it. It remembers, it waits. You're already marked." "Marked?" Olivia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "What does that mean?" Mace shook his head. "Blackridge isn't just a town, it's a trap. The hollow has always been here. Long before the town was settled, people spoke of a veil, a space between worlds. Those who trespass, they never leave." "Not really." She frowned. "A veil? Between worlds?" Mace's gaze shifted to the window, toward the forest. "The hollowed veil, that's what they call it. The ground there, it's soaked with memory, with sacrifice. People came here generations ago seeking power, wealth, knowledge. They made bargains with what lies beyond the veil. And the hollow, it keeps its debts." Olivia felt her stomach twist. "Bargains? What kind of bargains?" Mace didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "Rituals, sacrifices. People vanished, and some stayed behind, caught between life and death. That's why the town is empty. That's why the people look like they do. Because even those who survive, they are not whole." He handed her an old yellowed journal. The cover was cracked, the pages brittle. "Read it," he said. "It belonged to a man named Elias Crow. He came here a century ago. Everything in this town traces back to him." Olivia sat on the edge of her bed and opened the journal. The handwriting was spidery, almost frantic, describing rituals in the forest clearing. What must be the same spot she had stumbled upon the previous night. The words spoke of offerings, chance to draw the veil, and the hollow itself. An entity hungry for life, for fear, for memory. One entry stood out. "The hollow watches. It hungers. We cannot leave the hollowed veil, and it cannot leave us. We are bound to it, and to those who come after. Beware the newcomers. They are food, and curiosity is the sharpest knife." The more she read, the more Olivia realized that Blackridge was a nexus, a place where the boundary between the living and the hollowed veil was thin, fragile, and deadly. The townspeople weren't just hiding secrets, they were trapped by them. Determined to understand, Olivia decided she had to see the ritual ground again. Night was coming, and she needed to face the hollow, to document it fully if she was to write her book. She followed the path from the previous night, flashlight and notebook in hand. The mist had returned, thicker than ever, curling around her legs, soft but suffocating. The forest was silent, too silent. No wind, no birds, no rustling, only the faint pulse beneath her feet, as if the earth itself were alive. When she reached the clearing, her breath caught. The ground was marked with symbols etched deep into the soil, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. Candles, some still burning, others just burned out stubs, were arranged in concentric circles. Animal bones littered the edges, and in the center, a shallow pit had been dug, dark and cold, like the mouth of some ancient beast. Olivia stepped closer, her hand trembling as she shone her flashlight into the pit. The darkness inside seemed to shift, almost breathing, almost alive. Whispers rose around her, unintelligible, yet each word pricked at her mind. Then she saw them, shadows moving inside the pit, writhing and twisting. Faces emerged, some familiar, some grotesque, all trapped in agony. They stared at her, mouths opening and closing as if trying to speak. Yet no sound emerged. A voice, louder this time, rolled over her like thunder. "You see the hollow? You step closer. You are marked." Olivia stumbled back, her heart hammering. The ground trembled slightly beneath her feet. And then she realized the forest around her was changing. Trees shifted, their shapes bending toward her. The mist thickened, coiling like serpents, swallowing the clearing whole. The ritual ground was not just a place. It was alive. It was the hollow's mouth, and it was hungry. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, tall, thin, impossibly still. Its eyes glowed faintly in the mist. And Olivia knew instantly this was a sentinel, one of the lost bound to the hollow. "You are curious," it whispered. "Curiosity is the key, but beware. The hollow does not forgive. It only remembers, and it only takes." Olivia's mind raced. She wanted to flee, but her legs would not obey. She realized then that the hollowed veil was more than a story, more than a legend. It was real, and Blackridge was its altar. And as the wind howled, carrying the voices of the lost and the whispers of the hollow itself. Olivia understood one terrible truth. Some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. The hollow had waited for her, and it would not let her leave. Night fell fast in Blackridge, more oppressive than any darkness Olivia had ever known. The mist crept along the streets like a living thing, curling around the corners of buildings, sneaking under doors, and pressing against her skin with an icy touch. The town was silent, yet the silence itself seemed to whisper, warning her to turn back. Olivia had spent the afternoon questioning Mace and the few townspeople, brave enough to speak, trying to understand the hollow's patterns. But no one offered answers, only fearful glances, hushed warnings, and cryptic statements. They come at night. They vanish, and the hollow remembers. Do not wander alone. As twilight deepened, Olivia felt an urge she couldn't resist. She needed to see the hollow again, to study it, to understand it. With her flashlight and notebook in hand, she stepped into the mist-drenched streets. The first disappearance happened silently. A young woman carrying groceries from the general store vanished just a few steps ahead of Olivia. One moment she was walking briskly. The next, she had been swallowed by the fog, leaving only her basket on the ground. No scream, no struggle, nothing. Just a faint echo like a memory whispered in the mist. You shouldn't be here. Olivia froze, stomach churning, heart hammering. She wanted to run, but fear and curiosity entwined into a paralyzing force. She moved cautiously toward the town square, where she noticed more signs of the hollow's work. Footprints appeared and disappeared. Shadows shifted independently of the moonlight, and faint whispers echoed from alleyways and empty buildings. By midnight, more residents had vanished. Mace himself was gone, leaving only the faint smell of decay and the echo of a single word, marked. Olivia felt the weight of the town pressing down on her. Blackridge was a trap, and she was now deeply entangled in its hunger. She realized the hollow didn't just feed on fear, it consumed people entirely, erasing their presence, leaving only whispers and shadows as remnants. A sudden sound snapped her attention, a low, guttural hum coming from the forest's edge. Olivia knew instinctively that she would find the hollow there. She stepped toward the tree line, each step heavy, as if the ground itself resisted her. The clearing was transformed. The ritual ground glowed faintly. The symbols etched deep into the soil, pulsing as though alive. Candles flickered with an unnatural light, and the pit in the center seemed darker, deeper, hungering. Olivia shined her flashlight inside. She saw fleeting shapes, people, or what used to be people, twisting, writhing, trapped between this world and the hollowed veil. You shouldn't have come, whispered a chorus of voices overlapping, urgent, desperate. You're next. Before she could react, the mist surged toward her, cold and viscous, wrapping around her legs. Figures emerged from the fog, lost souls, sentinels, the residents she had seen earlier in town. They reached for her, hands grasping, eyes hollow, mouths opening in silent screams. Olivia stumbled backward, tripping into the pit. The darkness inside was complete, and she felt herself being pulled downward, toward a void that wanted to swallow her whole. She clawed at the earth, trying to pull herself out, but the hollow's grasp was relentless. A voice deep and resonant echoed inside her mind. Curiosity is your curse. Fear is your food. Now but join us. The last thing she saw, before her flashlight flickered, and went out, was the faces of the lost, twisted and silent, staring at her with empty eyes. The pit seemed to widen, the mist thickening into something tangible, almost alive. And then the world went black. When she awoke, she was back in her room at the inn, or so it seemed. The window showed the same forest, the same mist, but everything was quieter, too quiet. No whispering, no shadows moving independently. She thought she had survived the night. But as she looked down at her notebook, she saw something that froze her blood. The words she had written earlier were gone. In their place, etched into the paper with a black, pulsing substance, were symbols she had never drawn and a single message. We remember you now. Olivia realized with horror that the hollow had followed her back. She was no longer merely an observer. She was part of the town, part of its ritual, part of the hollow's eternal hunger. And outside, in the misty streets of Blackridge, the whispers began again, calling her name, promising that the vanishing had only begun. Olivia could no longer pretend the town was safe. Blackridge had revealed its true nature, alive, hungry, and watching. Every street, every building, every whisper in the wind reminded her that the hollow was patient, meticulous, and eternal. She had spent the day in a daze, poring over Elias Crow's journal and tracing the symbols etched into the ground around the town. Each page hinted at a ritual that could bridge the hollowed veil completely, opening a doorway between this world and the void beyond. Those who performed it were said to vanish or worse, remain trapped in the in-between forever. By nightfall, Olivia knew she could wait no longer. If she wanted answers, if she wanted a chance to survive, she had to descend into the forest and confront the hollow directly. The path was familiar, yet transformed. The trees leaned in unnaturally, their shadows stretching like claws across the misted ground. The ritual symbols glowed faintly, pulsing like the heartbeat of something alive. Olivia's flashlight flickered as whispers rose around her, a chorus of voices calling, warning, taunting. Come, see, join. She followed the glowing symbols to the heart of the forest. The clearing where the pit yawned like the mouth of an ancient predator. Candles burned in concentric circles, and the shadows of the lost moved within them, dancing, twisting, trapped yet alive in a nightmarish ballet. The hollow itself hovered above the pit, a vast, writhing void of darkness that absorbed every flicker of light. Its presence pressed against Olivia's chest, heavy, cold, unrelenting. She could feel her thoughts being pulled toward it, memories twisting, fear rising in raw, sharp waves. You came willingly, the hollow whispered, a voice that was every voice she had ever known, both familiar and alien. You wanted to know. Now, see? The pit roared to life. Faces appeared in the darkness. Mace, the pale woman from the store, the hollow-eyed youth, all twisted, silent, watching. The hollow's tendrils of darkness stretched toward Olivia, coiling around her, probing her mind. She could feel their hunger, a desire not for flesh alone, but for memory, for identity, for the essence of the soul itself. Desperate, she remembered the journal. Crow had written of a counter-ritual, a way to glimpse the hollow fully and perhaps disrupt its grasp, though the cost was never clear. Olivia traced the symbols in the dirt with trembling hands, whispering the incantation she had painstakingly copied, feeling the air thicken around her. The hollow shrieked not a sound of rage, but of awareness, of curiosity. It recoiled slightly, unsure of her intent. For the first time, Olivia saw beyond the black void. Within it, shapes of the lost writhed, their features twisted into grotesque mockeries of life. The void seemed to pulse, alive with collective memory and suffering. You see too much, it hissed. Curiosity binds you. Olivia took a trembling step closer to the pit. I see, she said, her voice echoing, but I will not be taken. The hollow surged forward, a tidal wave of darkness swallowing the candles, the trees, the clearing itself. Olivia felt herself lifted off the ground, suspended between the veil of reality and the hollow. Panic and dread clawed at her, but she clung to the symbols, to the words she had memorized. In that moment, she glimpsed the truth of Blackridge. Every soul taken by the hollow was not destroyed but trapped, folded into the veil, their consciousness twisted into the fabric of the town. Blackridge itself was a construct of the hollow's hunger, a place where the living and the lost intertwined, feeding it endlessly. The lost figures reached for her. Their hands were icy, their eyes pleading. The hollow's voice thundered inside her mind. Join us, your fear, your memory, your life. And then Olivia understood the choice before her. Step fully into the pit, and she would be part of the hollow forever. A sentinel among the lost. Step back and she might escape, but the hollow would remember, hunt and draw her back eventually. Summoning every ounce of courage, she chanted the final words of the incantation. The ground beneath her trembled, and the pit glowed with blinding light. The hollow recoiled, letting out a shriek that shook the forest. Olivia fell backward, landing hard on the edge of the clearing, gasping for air. The mist began to lift slightly. Shadows of the lost swirled around the edges of the clearing, but their grasp on her loosened. For now she had survived. For now she had seen beyond the hollowed veil without being consumed. But deep in her chest she felt a lingering presence, a weight she could not shake, a whisper she could not silence. The hollow was patient, and it remembered her. Night fell over Blackridge like a suffocating shroud. The mist rolled in heavier than ever, curling along the streets and squeezing into every crevice. Olivia knew she had no choice but to confront what awaited her. The hollow was no longer a distant threat, it was rising, consuming everything in its path, and the town itself seemed to pulse with its hunger. From her room at the inn, she could hear it, the low hum, The whispers, the faint sobs of the lost. The entire town had become a stage for the Hollow's hunger, its appetite growing with every passing hour. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she clutched the journal and flashlight, knowing that tonight could be her last. The streets were deserted. Windows stared back at her like hollow eyes. The air was thick, nearly solid, and every step she took echoed unnaturally. And then she saw them shadows flitting along walls. Just beyond the light of her flashlight, figures she recognized, once human but now twisted, reaching for her with hands that were almost smoke, almost flesh. "They remember you," a chorus of voices whispered, echoing off the buildings and into her mind. The Hollow remembers. The clearing called her. She knew she had to go there. The ritual ground, the pit, was the center of it all, the source of the Hollow's power. She followed the path she had memorized, each step bringing her closer to a nightmare she could no longer avoid. The forest opened to the clearing, and her breath caught in her throat. The Hollow had grown beyond anything she had seen before. It was no longer confined to the pit. It stretched across the clearing, tendrils of shadow reaching into the sky, curling around trees, consuming the faint glow of her flashlight. Faces of the lost swirled within it, their eyes pleading, screaming, silent. "You came to see," the Hollow boomed, its voice 1,000 layered tones, simultaneously seductive and terrifying. "Now you will join us, and all will be remembered." The ground quaked beneath her feet. The candles burned themselves out in an instant, leaving only darkness. The mist thickened, enveloping her, pressing against her chest, tugging at her legs, whispering promises of power, fear, and oblivion. Olivia remembered the incantation from Crow's journal. She began to chant, trembling, her voice barely audible over the rising roar of the Hollow. Symbols etched in the soil glowed faintly in response, pulsing with energy. The Hollow recoiled slightly, as if uncertain, its tendrils thrashing in protest. Suddenly, a hand cold, thin, and skeletal grabbed her ankle. Another followed, climbing up her legs, and she felt the desperate, icy grip of the lost. Their eyes met hers, empty, yet full of sorrow, and she realized that each soul was tethered to the Hollow, forced to serve it, bound forever. "No!" she shouted, forcing her body free. She stumbled backward, chanting faster, the words of the incantation echoing through the clearing. The Hollow writhed in anger, its shadows lashing out like black lightning. Trees snapped, the ground cracked, and a wind rose that seemed to howl with the voices of the vanished. Then she saw it, an opening in the pit, a place where the veil between worlds thinned, glowing faintly with an unholy light. It was the Hollow's core, its anchor, its heart. She had a choice: enter it, attempt to sever the Hollow's hold, or flee and leave the town to its fate. Driven by determination and fear, Olivia stepped forward. The shadows surged toward her, reaching, grasping, begging, screaming. Her voice shook, but she completed the final words of the incantation, and the pit responded, glowing brighter. The Hollow recoiling violently, its tendrils shrinking, writhing in pain. A deafening roar filled the air, a sound that was not just heard, but felt inside her skull, rattling her mind. The lost souls screamed, simultaneously liberated and tormented, swirling around the pit in a maelstrom of shadow and mist. For a moment it seemed as if the Hollow would be destroyed. The ground beneath her cracked, the forest trembled, and the clearing shook with a force that could tear the world apart. Olivia felt herself lifted, suspended on the edge of reality, staring directly into the maw of the hollowed veil. And then silence. The Hollow shrank, vanished into the mist, leaving the clearing empty, still, cold. Olivia collapsed to the ground, shaking, exhausted, her heart racing. For the first time, the night was quiet. The mist began to dissipate. The voices were gone, or so she thought. A faint whisper, soft, almost imperceptible, grazed her ear. "We will wait. And remember, until you return." Olivia shivered. She had survived, but the Hollow had not been destroyed. It was patient, eternal, and now it had marked her permanently. Blackridge would never let her go. The veil had been glimpsed, and in doing so she had become part of it. As she stumbled back toward the inn, the shadows of the forest seemed to follow, stretching longer with every step. The hollowed veil had been breached, and Olivia knew with a bone-deep certainty that she would never be free of it. The town of Blackridge slept, silent and waiting, its hunger never sated. And Olivia's name echoed softly in the distance, carried on the wind. "Olivia, we remember you now." Dawn never came clearly in Blackridge, even as the sky lightened. The mist clung stubbornly to the crooked houses and winding streets, a gray curtain separating the town from the world beyond. Olivia wandered through the streets, exhausted, her body trembling from the events of the night. She had survived the Hollow's full manifestation, but she knew instinctively that survival did not mean freedom. The townspeople, or what remained of them, watched from windows and doorways. Their eyes were hollow, empty of hope, yet sharp with the awareness of her presence. Some whispered to her in voices barely audible, fragments of warning or plea. Do not stay. Do not look back. You cannot leave. The Hollow remembers. Curiosity is a chain, and you are bound. Olivia's notebook hung from her hand, pages still etched with symbols she barely understood, yet she knew they had power. She tried to find the courage to flee, to escape the town, to put distance between herself and the Hollow. But Blackridge would not release her. She reached the edge of the forest, the clearing where the pit yawned like a wound in the earth. The ground was silent now, the ritual symbols dim, the pit empty, or so it seemed. But in the depths of her vision, she saw movement, shadows stirring just beneath the surface. Restless, patient, waiting. A soft whisper grazed her ear, familiar and terrible. Return, we are patient, and we remember. She spun, flashlight trembling in her hands, but no one was there. The mist swirled around her, thick and suffocating, carrying the voices of those lost to the Hollow, their whispers layering atop one another until they became a singular, chilling chorus. You are ours now. The Hollow remembers you. Olivia's chest tightened. The realization struck her with brutal clarity. She could leave Blackridge physically, but the Hollow had already marked her, tied her essence to the town and its dark hunger. Wherever she went, its whispers would follow, faint at first, then growing louder, until curiosity, fear, and memory drew her back again. She stumbled back to the inn, Mace's empty desk and silent halls greeting her. The world outside seemed impossibly distant, like a dream she could almost forget, but she knew better. The Hollow had seeped into her mind, her soul threading through her thoughts, her memories, her very perception of reality. As night fell once more, the mist thickened, wrapping the town in its eternal embrace. Olivia sat by the window, clutching the notebook to her chest, listening. The whispers returned, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves. Olivia, remember. Return. She understood then that the Hollow was not bound by time, nor constrained by death. It did not kill, it consumed, it trapped, it waited. Blackridge had been patient for generations, and now it had claimed her as part of its endless cycle. Even in her isolation, in the distant hope of escape, the Hollow remained. She could feel its presence in the wind, in the fog, in the very walls of her mind. The veil had been glimpsed, and there was no unseeing it. The final terrifying truth settled deep in her chest. The hollowed veil was eternal, and she was now a part of it. Outside, the mist shifted. Shadows moved independently of light. Figures appeared where none should exist, and the whispers swelled into a chorus that filled the night. Olivia, we remember you, forever. Her breath caught. She understood that Blackridge, the Hollow, and the lost souls were a single, unbroken cycle of hunger and memory, and somewhere just beyond the mist, the veil waited, watching, patient, and endless. Olivia closed her eyes. She had survived the night, but the curse would follow her always. She was no longer just a visitor. She was part of the Hollow, and the Hollow would never forget. The town of Blackridge slept, or seemed to, but in the whispers, in the mist, and in the shadows, its hunger endured, eternal, patient, unbroken, and somewhere deep in the forest, the Hollow waited for the next curious soul.